Hey, Christian, it is good to be back, and I'm really... Oh, do you hear that? Do you hear that? Here she comes. Hey, Voss, what's up?
Oh, hi.
Yeah, I'm kind of busy.
What's the Hulu login?
You couldn't text that?
Parenting is amazing. It can be so beautiful and so hard. We all really want to raise healthy, balanced, faithful children, but,
We're trying to pass on this beautiful faith, and we're working out our own salvation right here every day with our kids.
My name is Christian Gonzalez. I'm the father of 3 wild, beautiful daughters.
And I'm Elisa Bjeletich Davis, and I have a whole house full of kids from tweens to young adults, and some already out in the world.
And we're here to join you on this journey through the highs and lows of parenting, amidst snotty noses, messy rooms, and busy schedules.
We don't have it all figured out, but we're in it with you. And our message is simple. Dear parents, you're not alone.
Welcome to Trials and Triumphs from the Trenches. Hi, Elisa.
Hi, Christian.
Man, I am so excited for this project, and I'm so grateful that I get to do it with you. I mean, first of all, you're just one of my favorite people in the world. And secondly, the work itself I'm just excited. I'm excited to do this. It's going to be so much fun.
I'm excited too, Christian. I'm super excited. I am thrilled to have an opportunity to just hang out with you, an excuse really to hang out with you all the time. That is fantastic. And when you approached me with the idea of a parenting podcast that really explores the ins and outs and the highs and lows, right? Like not advice, but really like the difficulties and the joys of raising kids in the Orthodox Church, I just thought, yes, we need this, and I am in. I'm so glad to be a part of it.
Awesome. Me too. And since you have a million children, I figured you were a natural selection for this, especially, when I consider the fact that between the two of us, we have children ranging in age from 4 to 24. And, if you add up all the years of parenting each of those individuals, that's like a lot of years of parenting experience between the two of us. So I feel like we're, it's like over 100 years of parenting that we've done collectively.
That is a lot of years. That is
Yes,
a lot of
yes.
It's actually a little troubling. Don't remind me. It's a whole lot of years.
Boy. Some trauma there, maybe? I don't know.
Yeah, a little bit. And the reality of my mortality, right? These kids turned my hair prematurely gray. They remind me of my mortality all the time.
So it's just fear then, just fear of dying.
Well, and fear of what my fragility means to them, right? Like, what does it mean for them?
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Because at least personally, I don't think I ever thought about my mortality or, dying or whatever until I had children. It just was never really on my mind. And sometimes I just get overwhelmed sometimes thinking about my children having to live in a world without me. Like, just feels so sad to me for them. Like, I'm bringing this person into this world, most likely so that they'll have to say goodbye to me. Like, they'll be the ones who have to live after me. I don't know. It just seems sad.
It is sad.
We're off to a bleak start here.
It is
Thank
sad.
you for listening to this
Terrible.
podcast. Welcome.
Goodness, welcome. No, but it is true. You worry about that. And as they get older, it's more like stuff like, I want to see my grandkids. I've got to take good care of myself because I want to be there when they get married, when they have kids, all those kinds of things. But it does cause you to think about your mortality a lot more than you did before you had kids. That is for sure.
Absolutely. Well, before we jump in today, maybe we should take a little bit of time to introduce ourselves and wonder why anyone should listen to a podcast with the two of us speaking about parenthood. So, Lisa, why don't you introduce yourself?
Well, I don't know if I can make a case for you to listen to me, but I am a podcaster, an author. I speak at churches sometimes. Mostly I'm focused on religious education and faith formation, not as much parenting per se. But I have a lot of experience raising up kids. I've been through just about everything. I have 5 living children, as I mentioned. I also have one who passed away. I lost one in a miscarriage as well. I have 2 stepchildren. So I guess that means that I can appreciate a lot of different aspects of parenthood. And how
Yes.
about you, Christian? What are your qualifications? Because I feel like you're the one with the real like parenting expertise qualifications. I'm like parenting experience. Your
No,
expertise. It's
no,
different.
no, no, definitely not. But yeah, so I am, first of all, the director of ministry for the Pan Orthodox Youth and Young Adult Ministry Agency, known as Orthodox Youth and Young Adult Ministries, or OYM. And so this is kind of part of the work that we're trying to do is just kind of spend some time encouraging parents to really lean into their God-given role as uh, the primary influences in their kids' lives. So that's kind of what I'm doing on a ministry level, but I'm also a licensed marriage and family therapist in the state of Arizona. So I spent a lot of time, in my life between the children, youth, and family work that I do in the church and my marriage and family therapy stuff, thinking about family systems and just even thinking about the church itself as a family system in which we're trying to raise kids, and how all of our different things kind of can be transmitted to the people beyond us. But as you said, like you've got a bunch of different parenting experiences. I've got three kiddos, two of whom are my biological children. One is my stepdaughter. And but for me, there's no, I don't, I've been with her since she was little, and so I have to like remember that she's my stepkid.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm really excited that we get to talk about this stuff, and yeah, we'll see how this goes. It'll be a fun project.
I'm looking forward to it. I really am.
Me
Absolutely.
too.
So what's our first topic? What are we talking about today?
Yeah, well, I thought, since this is our first episode of Dear Parents, You're Not Alone, that we could just discuss, some few things, kind of like an overall big picture thing, like why this podcast, but also then to talk a little bit just generally about parenting itself, like why it's such a high and sacred calling, but also maybe a little bit of what makes it so tough.
Yes, I like that. And then we can dive into those topics more deeply in later episodes, but this is like a sampler. This is like a sampler platter to begin the
Hmm.
to begin the podcast. I love it.
Yes, we hope that you will feast sumptuously upon the
Yes,
sample platter of this introduction to this podcast. Enjoy,
indeed.
literally.
Bon appetit, my friend.
Yes. And you're welcome. And you're welcome.
Yeah, I think it's good that we warn people up front that we might get a little silly sometimes. That
Yes.
does happen.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah,
Well, parenting is
absolutely.
funny. So,
It's true.
um, yeah, it is. So, okay. So let's get started here. First, why this podcast? Why now? Well, as far as I can see, there's a couple of reasons that I thought something like this could really be useful. And then as we talked about it, we kind of decided, yeah, it's not a bad idea. The first is just that even I, myself and my wife as parents, I think sometimes we can feel really alone or isolated in the whole raising children thing. Like everyone else seems to kind of know what they're doing and we're just kind of figuring it out on the fly. So I don't know. Maybe I'm the only person that feels that way, but I don't think that I am. And so it seems to me that a parenting podcast could just be a way to be a couple of voices that are saying, hey, there's people who are in it with you, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's true. I think parenting can feel isolating because you feel like everyone else knows what they're doing and because we all kind of show our best side to each other, right? So it seems like everybody's doing better than we are. But we're really built to be in communion with one another, right? Especially in the church. We think about this idea that we're saved in community. And I want to help make that a reality here, right? Like, let's be a community of parents who can talk about how hard it is and the places where we've gone wrong or I mean sometimes you don't even do anything wrong and you're doing a great job and the kids are going sideways anyway. So I mean I feel like it's necessary for us to be able to
Yeah.
talk about these things with one another if we want to really be a community. So we'll have to
Yeah,
share those
exactly.
struggles. Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
that's kind of why we're going with like the, you jump first philosophy here, where we thought maybe just talking about these things in a public setting might help other parents feel like they could open up their own struggles as well. Trying to, I don't know, encourage parents to find a way to really connect with what's going on in the lives of other parents and just to share some of their own stories from the trenches.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, we want this to serve people just in a way of encouragement and saying, hey, you're not alone, and we also want to hear from you.
Yeah, that's right. Because we'll have an email address, right? Like there will be an email address. You can probably a little contact link on the wherever you're listening to the podcast, and you'll be able to click there and send us messages. And we're hoping that you will, ideas for topics that you think we ought to explore, maybe stories about things in your own family, questions, whatever it is. We want to hear from people and know what everybody else is struggling with, and see if maybe we're not struggling with it too, or maybe we can find someone else who is, and we can all talk about it. But I also think, we'll try to provide some resources, right? Like ideally, as we find great books on topics or good websites or videos or whatever, we're going to pass those along. And so that'll be part of our mission here, is to help inspire and encourage and equip all of us to be better parents and to share with one another as we go through it.
Yes, and I'm also excited because we're hoping that we'll be able to bring guests on in the future, as well, like parenting experts or other therapists, clergy, people who really seem to be doing the work actively as well, who are in the trenches with us. People who might just have something to offer for us to chew on. But again, all of this is to serve that overall kind of thumb line in this thing, to say that you're not alone in the struggle.
Yeah.
We're all doing the best we can here, and we're all limping toward the kingdom together. And occasionally we can enjoy a beautiful view once in a while. So that's kind of the hope here.
I love that.
I'm
I love
excited,
that.
man. I
Me
know it's
too.
gonna be good. It's
I'm
gonna be
excited.
good.
I like it.
So the next thing that we kind of wanted to touch on here is just the idea of parenting itself as being both a high and tough calling. So Elisa, I'm curious, what do you think about this? What makes parenting such a high calling?
Well, I mean, it's a high calling because we're entrusted with the lives of actual human beings, right? I mean, that is huge, and there's no way really to prepare for it. There's no licensing process, right? Like, there's no instruction manual, as we say. You load up the baby at the hospital and you drive away, and that's it. You're on your own, and it's complicated. So, but it's a huge responsibility.
It is, yes. Um, Especially because we're sort of invited into, modeling and being in some capacity like God through this whole thing, right? God as the perfect parent, as the father of all. So to realize, in some sense, that he is the actual parent of our children, especially if we say our Father, then that makes our kids, in some deeply theological sense, our brothers and sisters. Like they're not actually our children; they're our little brothers and sisters. So he invites us then to kind of stand in his place in the family and entrusts us to raise and nurture his children, um, which is crazy that we get to participate in that work of God, in the lives of our brothers and sisters, of our little brothers and sisters. Um, but it's a huge responsibility, man.
It is a huge responsibility, but it's so good, right? Because that calls us to try to be more like God, and that's you can see where it's so good for us, right? But it's huge,
Yeah.
and I mean, we know that when we make mistakes, when parents do like a really poor job of raising children, there are lifelong consequences, right? Like whether it's that a parent is selfish or abusive, disconnected, ambivalent, like all these things impact kids. And, our kids end up in therapy for years talking about it. So
Yes.
there,
I was
there's
going to
like,
say, I will always have a job as long as that
right,
continues. And that
exactly.
is a job I
But
do not want to have. Like, I don't want to have that job. Like,
I,
let's,
wouldn't it be great if therapists were just like, well, nobody needs any help. I guess I'll just go like garden or something else. That would be lovely.
yes.
But instead, we're just like, bring them on. We need more therapists all the time because
Mhm.
we're struggling, and people carry real damage. So these are high stakes. So it's
Yes.
important that we're
Yes.
always working to do our best and to figure out what our best is.
Yes. And I think that that's important to recognize that um, our best is not perfect always, right? That we
Right.
can want to have, do our best and have good intentions, but no one is perfect. We're all gonna blow it somewhere. is no such thing as a perfect parent. In fact, one of the stuff that's talked about even in a lot of the literature is just the idea of being a good enough parent. Like, how do I be a good enough parent so that I don't like royally screw up my kids? But I was talking with another therapist, a friend of mine, and they were saying that one of their clients just kind of had this like weird realization that nobody makes it through childhood without trauma. And there's like really some just reality to that. We all pick up traumas in some
Mm-hmm.
capacity, and that's tough. And I think the role of the parent is that we get to try to be a supportive, loving presence to them amidst all of that, but recognizing the way to do that. There's no tactic to that. There's just authentic connection because every kid is different. We have to recognize the unique beauty and need of all of our children, and that's not always easy to do. You know.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think, I mean, it is so interesting. When you say that no one gets through childhood without some trauma, right? I mean, we are raising our kids in a fallen world, and there are going to
Mm-hmm.
be all kinds of things outside of our control. But then even, within our own parenting, like you said, each kid is different. And as mine have gotten older, my young adults will talk about situations that were traumatizing or just terrible for them as kids. And it's like they both go through the same situation, and it's traumatizing for one and it's not for the other. And so it's, in some ways, it's just going to be impossible to be perfect. You can't be everything to all people. Was it all things to all people? But
Oh yeah.
yeah. And, and kids get frustrated with us. And it's kind of funny because like sometimes my kids will get frustrated that I'm not allowing something, or that I always have some input where it's like, I'd like consider like, morally speaking, like, what is the moral angle on this? Is there a question that needs to be answered?
I have no
And
idea what you're talking about. This
yeah,
frustration
your
that
kids
comes
just
from
know.
having those things. No, my kids are never frustrated or annoyed when I
My
say
kids get a little
maybe.
annoyed. Right. I'll be
What
like,
if?
if this were a movie, would you be the good guy? Are you sure? Like, but, but
You're
I mean,
starting to sound a little like Darth Vader right now. That's all I'm saying. All I'm saying
exactly right.
is
Or like,
definitely
have you
some
seen
dark
those
side of the
Mean
force.
Girls movies? Like, I feel like you might be on the wrong side of the Mean Girls movie. But
Yes.
no, but I mean, it's just, I always have to remind them, and I have to remind myself, right? Like, I have a sacred responsibility to guide this person and to help them become a good person who loves God. And I take
Mm,
that very seriously. And sometimes it means decisions are unpopular, even with me. Sometimes it means I'm doing something that makes my life harder. But there's no there's no way around it, right? This is just, it's a larger project. It's a sacred
mhm.
undertaking, a sacred calling.
Yes, yes. And I think that kind of paves the way into us for this kind of second part of this, that it is a
Yeah.
sacred calling. But because it's like this constant thing, it's just so tough. So I guess my question for you, Lisa, is why is it like why does it have to be so tough? Why is it such a struggle to parent our children well?
Well, I mean, before I had children, I did not think it was going to be this hard. People said it was difficult. I did not understand. And I was pretty sure there would just be a formula, like if you crack that code, you're going to be set. And so I read a lot of books and I was working it out. And, you do this for discipline, you do that for food, it's going to be fine. And at like age 19 or 20 or so, I could look at my parents and be like, this is exactly what they did wrong. I will not make those mistakes. I knew that all of my flaws were because of parenting errors they made. But then I had my first daughter, and there I was holding this newborn. And I realized, I am no more mature or wise, or I have all the character flaws I had last
Mm,
week. They are still here. And now I'm going to have to try to be a parent with all these flaws and weaknesses and find my way through it. And the truth is that we are all flawed, damaged people. My parents were, I am, everyone is. And so we're going to make mistakes, and we're going to, I don't know how to like have tendencies that have to do with our personality and our history, and maybe what has traumatized us in the past, or what has been difficult for us, or what has worked when we were children and doesn't work as
mhm.
adults. And all those things about us that make us all flawed, fallen people are going to make us flawed, fallen parents. And it's hard.
Yes. Yeah, no, absolutely. And I definitely resonate with that, that it's, we do have our unique weaknesses, things that maybe we, we're never used to. And we'll talk more about that actually in the next episode a little bit. But just like, for example, like I grew up as an only child, so it was always quiet unless I was making noise. And now, I have these three daughters, and it's always noisy unless I'm enforcing quiet. So it's, it's kind of like the opposite. And it's just a weird thing to adjust to kind of what you've become used to in the pattern of life. And, and if you're parenting with a partner, then that makes it even more complex, because now you have these two, strugglers, like people who are, trying to figure it out on the fly. So I do think that there's that element of it as well. Just even the idea of what does it look like to, um, co-parent, whether you're married to your co-parent or not. Like I think that there's a lot of questions around that. And then of course there's always the thing where, it feels like, and maybe, I don't know if you ever felt this way, but there were times when I feel like, okay, we're finally getting into a rhythm. We finally have like one of the like the kids are all going to sleep. We got the youngest to like actually stick to a bedtime, and like she's putting herself to sleep now, and it's great. And then maybe 3 days later, it's the 8-year-old who's waking up in the middle of the night, and it's like they're doing it for like 2 weeks in a row, and you're just like, what is happening? Like I thought that we just got this down, but now you're having a hard. It's like, so things are just always just changing all the time. And then the things that worked when she was 4, they don't work when she's 5. They don't work. It's like,
Yeah.
good grief.
Oh my gosh, it's so true, Christian. And you'll see as you go through, right? Like you'll hit the teen years and high school, and that's totally different deal than parenting like elementary kids. And then young adults, that's a whole other thing. I mean, kids change so much developmentally, and parenting them at every developmental stage is different. And then you combine that with their personalities and then their experiences. And maybe, one of them has a bad experience in middle school. And now you've got a whole bunch of new complications layered on top, right? Like you just don't know what is coming. And every time you
Mm-hmm.
seem to gain some expertise, it just gets outdated and obsolete right away. It's a little discouraging.
Totally. Totally. Yeah. So we're entering the teenage years for the first time with our oldest. And it is, it's just like, I have to remember that her brain is like actually like deconstructing and being rewired.
Yeah.
Like her brain is like going through this complete reorg. And it's like, could you imagine like going through that again? And here we are like 20 years later, 30 years later, 40 years later, as parents, like looking at some of this stuff going on in our kids, and we're like, what is wrong with you? But then like, imagine going through all that again for the first time. You know what I mean? Like the big feelings, the like having crushes, or having what, like, just the first time that you're experiencing all that. Good grief. Oh. um
Oh my
but
gosh.
and then like you throw in the elements of there being more than one person. It's not just like one kid. And
Yeah.
there's no such thing as the tactic. And I was saying this before, there's no such thing as the tactics. Like you have to actually learn how to respond to each one of your kids.
Mm-hmm. Yep, differently to each one. Even if the
Yes.
situation looks the same, it will probably be a different response. Different things will work with them. And then
Mhm.
as you're doing different things with them, they'll be like, but that's not how you did it with her. And it's like, yes, I know, but guess what? You're all so
Yes.
different. I can't do
Yep.
the same things with you guys. Like it doesn't work anymore. But I think one of the biggest challenges, though, for a lot of parents, like a lot of my friends, when I talk to them, one of the big things is you feel like you're learning this lesson again and again, that you are not in charge. Like you do
Mm.
not have control of things. You don't like, because, there's a thing where as your kids are getting older, you kind of feel like, you should be able to say like, hey, put that down and take out the garbage. And they should just like, oh, okay. And put it down and take out the garbage. And the truth is like, sometimes it takes them a while to transition or whatever it is. And you kind of get this feeling like, no, I demand obedience. Yeah, I need it right now. And the truth is that they're people, they're human beings, and we have to find ways to work with them. And some of this humbles us. I feel like the struggling with control, and right from when they're young, I don't know, I mean, even potty training or whatever, right? Or as babies, you can't just make a baby go to sleep, whatever it is. As they get older, it gets more complicated, but there's always this sort of underlying theme as a parent of just sort of learning that you have to trust that God's in charge, and you have to be able to hand some things over and recognize that you're just not in charge of this. Like you say, like there is no tactic. The part of the reason for that is because you're not really in charge of how it all comes out. You know what I mean? Like there are so many different factors. There's so much going on.
Yes. And to say that there's no tactic isn't to say that there's no such thing as having a plan, right? Or like having like a way that you want to go about things, or goals or goods that you're trying to shoot for. But man, it's the implementation of it that's tough. And kids know when you're doing something just to try to get them to shut up, or when you're doing something just to try to get them to do what you want them to do.
They're smart.
So yeah,
they're smart.
They are. Yeah. I mean, because we know when someone's trying to sell us something, and like the kids know too, when you're trying to sell them something. But it's tough. I think this speaks to kind of even what you were saying about like the losing of the control, right? Like, how do I actually let go and just be with my children? How do I let go and be present to this moment with them and respond, rather than kind of try to tighten my grip. And I think that like this is ultimately what makes like parenting such a struggle, is because it's not just that this is the only place where like we learn that we're not in control, but like all of life is a struggle, because it's continually showing us that we're not in control, right? Everything comes down to this. It's about learning to let go, to die to ourselves, to grind away at our selfishness, our attachments, whether it's to our furniture not having crayon all over it, or to even just the notion of sleep and comfort. That all of this this parenting stuff really is its own kind of asceticism, but theoretically could be the very best kind, because it's motivated by such a deep and real self-emptying love that mirrors the love of God the Father for his children. So
Amen.
Yeah, that's pretty much where we're going to be going through this podcast. It's a journey.
Just that.
It's a journey.
Yeah. But I mean, we're all on this journey together. We're all going to be working through it together, sort of honest about the difficult parts and stopping to savor the beautiful parts. And we have this high and beautiful calling that is also a struggle. It's a cross you might bear. You might say, sometimes that sounds very negative to people, but I think it is. I think it's a life-giving cross, like Christ's holy cross.
Yeah, that's exactly right, and that's actually exactly what we're going to talk about in our next episode: the cross of parenting.
Yes, which sounds like so much fun. We are
literally
fun people.
The funnest people. We are literally the funnest people ever.
Literally the funnest podcast. Up next, the cross. Terrible. We should have started positive, Christian.
Yes. Welcome, friends. All right, Elisa. See you next time.
See you next time, Christian. This has been a listener-supported joint presentation of OYM, Orthodox Youth and Young Adult Ministries, and Ancient Faith Radio.